Welcome to Daily Dose Radio, a 5-minute devotional podcast studying the Psalms verse by verse. Broadcast from the ever-beautiful Sharonville, Ohio, on the sunny side of Cincinnati. Hey there, friends. Welcome back to Daily Dose Radio here in the Bible Bistro. Are you ready to get away? Well, we're going to talk about getting away today, but really there's not a whole lot of getting away found here in verses 7 and 8. We begin the second theme of Psalm 139, which is God's presence. We have it beginning here in 7 and going all the way down through 10. Now today we're just going to treat verses 7 and 8. Let me read those for you. Whither shall I go from thy spirit? Or whither shall I flee from thy presence? If I ascend up into heaven, thou art there. If I make my bed in hell, behold, thou art there. Now, right off the bat, we have an important doctrine that's expressed here, and that is that God is a spirit and does not have a body like men. So you'll notice that in verse 7, whither shall I go from thy spirit? It's not that he can hide from the eye of somebody. God, we often talk about God having an eye, or having eyes, and him seeing, having ears and him hearing, having hands and him working, and so forth. But all that is anthropomorphisms. God doesn't have any of those things. What he is a spirit, and he is everywhere. He sees all things because he is all-seeing. He hears all things because he's all-hearing. So God is a spirit. Whither shall I go from thy spirit? Well, that question answers itself. You can't go anywhere that the Spirit of God is not there because he's God. Or whither shall I flee from thy presence? Well, that answers itself, doesn't it? If it's God's presence, then you can't flee from it at all. So you can't get away from him no matter where you go. But then he gives us some ideas. He says, if I ascend into heaven, you are there. Yes, he is. That's where he is. He's in heaven. But that's not the only place where he is. If I make my bed in hell, behold, thou art there. Well, now there's a thought for you. Who would want to flee from God's presence by going to hell? Well, actually, there are a lot of people who are trying to flee God's presence, and they would rather be in hell than they would in the presence of God. And so David says, if I ascend to heaven, if I descend into hell, if I make my bed in hell. Now, he's already said that God knows his lying down, and he knows his rising up. So no matter where the bed is, if it's made and if you're laying on it, God's going to know about it because God's a spirit. You can't hide from him. You can't run from him. Whither shall I flee from thy presence? Are you trying to flee from God's presence, friends? I hope not. But, you can't. Really, that's a comforting thought. As much as you might want to, you can't. And really, in your heart, you don't want to. You're not trying to flee, to run away from God. You're trying to run away from a problem. But you've assigned it or ascribed it to God for some reason. Listen, you can't go anywhere where his spirit is not. He is everywhere you go. Every breath you take, he's there. Every time you lie down, even if you make your bed, as the psalmist says here, ascend to heaven, if I make my bed in hell, behold, thou art there. The Lord knows, he sees, he's right there beside you. And as I said, this is a comforting thought, because no matter where we are, no matter what our condition, no matter the conditions around us, God is present. And that's the promise of the Bible. From Genesis to Revelation, the promise of the Bible is God's presence. He is always there. He is with his people. And so perhaps David is thinking he's going to run away from God, and he's trying to get away because of some thing that he's not happy with. Perhaps he's mad at God for something, and that's it. I'm putting my foot down, and I'm going to leave now. No, you really can't do that, because as a spirit, he's every single place you could possibly go. What a wonderful, comforting thought. Because eventually, you're going to turn back to him, and you're going to be glad that he's right there. Join me again tomorrow. We're going to look at verses 9 and 10 here on Daily Dose Radio. Thanks for listening to Daily Dose Radio. I'm David Smith. The music today has been performed by the Bluegrass Experiment. Thanks again for listening. I'll see you next time on Daily Dose Radio.